Okay, welcome back. So if you've ever, looked up Mito, the capital of Ibaraki Prefecture, you probably get two main pictures in your head. First, the Karakuen Garden, those incredible plum blossoms, absolutely beautiful. And second, Mito Komon, Tokugawa Mitsukuni, the wise old lord from TV and stories. It all seems very neat, clean history.
Right, like a nice, tidy postcard. And if you're the kind of traveler who likes to dig a bit deeper, you know that postcard view often hides the really fascinating, complex stuff.
Exactly, which is why we did this deep dive. Your sources totally reframe Mito. Our goal today isn't just a sightseeing checklist. It's about uncovering maybe 5 hidden gems, places that turn a standard historical visit into, well, a real cultural and philosophical journey.
Mm-hmm. And what's really striking is how Mito's history isn't just one story. It's layered with these tensions. We're looking at what you might call dialectical layers, this constant push and pull, between like rational politics on one hand, ancient local myths on the other, and then just the practical wisdom people needed to survive day to day. We can actually trace that tension across the city.
Okay, I like that. Let's unpack it. Starting with the source of Mito's big political ideas, what we're calling the ethical furnace of knowledge, right? The Kodokan, our first stop. People visit, it looks peaceful now, but this place was anything but quiet back then. This was the main Mito domain school, set up by the Ninth Lord Tokugawa Nariaki. And it wasn't just any school. It was famous as the largest Han school, domain school, in the whole Edo period. Huge!
It really was. And it wasn't just about education in the abstract. It was essentially a state-sponsored thought arsenal. Nariaki's ambition for it was intense, extreme, really.
Yeah.
And that shaped the very buildings. The whole place was designed around this idea of bunbu kenbi.
Ah, the literary and military arts together.
Exactly, seamless integration. It wasn't just a philosophy, it was architecture.
You can literally see that on the ground, can't you? You've got these buildings for serious Confucian study, deep intellectual work, and they're right next door to the military training grounds that run Pego.
Precisely. Knowledge wasn't just for thinking about, it had a purpose, a very specific political purpose. It had to serve the state.
And that intense focus, that ideology, that's what really powered Mito-gaku, right? The Mito School of Thought.
That's the core. Mito-gaku's central idea, Sunju revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, was incredibly potent. It basically provided the theoretical framework and the spiritual energy, you could say, for the Meiji Restoration that came later. It was a key driver pushing Japan towards modernization.
Okay, so that sounds like a major success story, a revolutionary idea born right there.
Yeah.
But where's the catch? The sources you looked at suggest there's a darker side, a more complicated legacy too.
There absolutely is, and that's the complexity you feel when you stand there. It's profound. The very same ideas that helped kickstart a revolution were also extremely rigid. They were so heavily based on ancient Confucian principles, they didn't really have much room for.
Modernity.
Yeah.
Different viewpoints. Pluralism.
Exactly, that lack of modernity, of pluralism. Many historians now see those same Mito-gaku ideas as contributing factors in Japan's later path towards militarism decades down the line.
Wow. So visiting the Kodokan isn't just looking at old buildings. You're standing in a place that forces you to think, doesn't it? About the ethics of knowledge. What happens when learning gets tied to an extreme political mission? You're walking where powerful ideas were forged, ideas that led to both revolution and later tragedy.
It's a heavy place, historically speaking.
Okay, so if Kodokan is the rational political brain of Mito, let's shift gears. Let's explore the deeper, older roots, the local faith. Let's talk about Rokujizo-ji Temple, established way, way back in 807 AD. It's one of the city's most ancient sacred spots.
And this temple is a perfect example of how power gets integrated culturally. It's an ancient Buddhist site focused on life cycles, birth, death, but it also serves as the ancestral shrine for the Tokugawa family, the ruling family. That merging wasn't just random, it was strategic.
So why did the Tokugawas, this powerful political family, choose this specific ancient temple? Why not build their own grand thing somewhere else?
Because Rokujizo-ji already held immense power and influence in the region. Long before the Tokugawas solidified their rule there, it was already a major center, the major center in the Kanto area, for prayers related to fertility, healthy children.
Yeah.
The crucial Hatsumiya Mude, the baby's first shrine visit.
Okay, so it tapped into something already deeply important to local people.
Exactly. The Tokugawas were politically very savvy. They understood that by adopting this established center of local faith, this place tied to birth and ancestry, they were basically weaving their own authority directly into the cultural fabric, the deep-seated beliefs of the region. It helped secure their acceptance.
That's fascinating political maneuvering and betting power like that. And
Yeah.
when you visit, the place itself feels ancient. You mentioned the thickness of time, these enormous old trees.
Yes, huge cedar and ginkgo trees, maybe 1,000 years old. That's history you can touch. Almost geologic time. Right. And linking that ancient past to the, well, slightly less ancient past is the famous weeping cherry tree. It's about 200 years old, they say. And the story is that it's a descendant of a cherry tree admired by Mito himself.
So it all connects.
It does. The whole site speaks to transmission, continuity. The ancient trees, the descendant cherry tree, the prayers for new babies. It all symbolizes hope and the flow of life right there alongside this center of political power. Hashtag. Oh, see, the root of the city, Yoshida Shrine. Now, if Rokujizo-ji represents that flow and integration, Yoshida Shrine takes us even deeper to the city's, let's say, foundational spirit. It's celebrated as Mito's oldest shrine. It represents the raw, pre-Tokugawa, almost mythological roots of the place.
And the main deity enshrined there is Yamako Takeru, the ancient hero.
Yes, the legendary figure linked to the eastward expansion in Japan's foundational myths. So the shrine anchors Mito not just to the Edo period, but way back to an era of creation stories, natural forces, and empire building, primal stuff.
And there's a connection to the land itself, too, right? Something about a lake.
That's what's so interesting. Local legend insists the shrine site used to be a large lake, and this actually lines up really well with historical and geographical evidence. We know Mito historically had lots of wetlands, marshes, water resources.
Which connects to what you said earlier about.
Eel. Exactly. Mito being famous for eel makes perfect sense if the area was rich in water. So the myth, the history, and the geography all kind of intertwine there.
It's like a clue to the landscape before the castle and the samurai arrived. And yet, despite being so ancient, the shrine is still very much alive today. It's popular now for matchmaking and musubi and traffic safety prayers.
Right. Which poses a really interesting question for us, the deep travelers. How did these incredibly ancient forces, these myths rooted in conquest and wild nature, how did they manage to adapt, to transform themselves to meet really basic, modern human needs?
Like finding love or just hoping for a safe commute.
Precisely. The shrine survives, arguably, because it keeps finding ways to be relevant to enduring human desires. Connection, security, it adapts its function.
Okay, so we've touched on ideology and ancient faith. Now let's look at the physical structures of power. The Mito Castle Otemon Gate. It's been beautifully reconstructed recently. It's the grand entrance, the public face of the domain's authority. And it stands right near the Kodokan, that intellectual center. It's meant to impress, to project power.
Definitely. That gate represents the official story, the history that's visible, accessible, the one the city chooses to highlight for visitors. But the real insight, the deeper layer, comes from the contrast between that grand gate and the subtle, almost hidden evidence of everyday samurai life, evidence found through archaeology nearby.
You mentioned a concept from the sources, Liddy. Could you explain that a bit?
Sure. Think of the gate as the surface, the appearance. The Lizi is more like the inner principle, the underlying reality, the true substance. It's what archaeologists find when they dig below the surface in the areas around the gate. Places where, say, senior retainers used to live. They don't find treasure or grand structures. They find pits, trenches, simple foundations, different layers of soil. Mundane stuff.
Okay, but why do those small, mundane details matter? Maybe even more than the big reconstructed gate. What did those pits and soil layers actually tell us?
They confirm the lived reality of a highly controlled, rigidly planned society. These seemingly unimportant findings are crucial because they prove the area was meticulously laid out as Bukiashiki-designated samurai housing blocks. And they provide concrete evidence for how the strict Shinokusho class system warrior, farmer, artisan, merchant was actually implemented on the ground.
So the power wasn't just declared at the gate. It was literally built into the ground plan, into the size and placement of every house foundation, every ditch.
Exactly. The authority wasn't just symbolic, it structured daily life down to the smallest detail.
That really changes how you experience the area. You stand awestruck by the massive rebuilt gate, thinking about power. Then you reflect on the heavy ethical questions at Kodokan. And then you consider these invisible ruins, these tiny fragments, and you contemplate the rigid social order, the mundane reality and constraints revealed by those microscopic details. The system's truth was in the planning, not just the performance at the gate.
It's about seeing both the imposing structure and the hidden blueprint beneath it.
We've covered ideas, faith, structure. Now let's get to something everyone connects with. Food. What did people eat? And we need to look beyond Naso here, which, don't get me wrong, is famous and important in Mito. But the sources pointed to a really surprising historical staple Mito was once well known for: eel, unagi.
That's right. The historical popularity of eel is significant. It points towards past economic prosperity, and it ties directly back to what we discussed earlier, those abundant water resources, the wetlands, geography, myth, local economy, all connected through food.
So the local cuisine actually tells two different stories, two historical narratives almost.
Precisely. There's the narrative of wealth and luxury. That's the eel, historically. And today, you see it in things like high-grade Hitaki beef, which meets top national quality standards, and the locally prized Okukuji shamo chicken. Indicators of quality and, well, affluence.
Okay, that's the wealth story. What about the other side? The resilience narrative.
That's where you find the really deep historical wisdom, I think, in the traditional preserved foods. Foods that demonstrate how people adapted to the local climate and resources, making do, surviving, thriving even.
We hear resilience a lot, but can you give a specific example from the sources that really shows that survival wisdom in action?
Absolutely. Take shimi konnyaku. It's basically freeze-dried konnyaku or devil's tongue jelly, but the key is how it's made. The production process absolutely requires the region's harsh, cold winters for the freeze-drying process to work.
So they're harnessing the environment itself, turning a constraint, the cold, into a tool for preservation.
Exactly. It's a pure use what you've got survival philosophy, adapting to nature's limits and making something valuable from them.
That's brilliant. And what about soboro natto? How does that fit in?
Saburo natto is another great example. It's preserved food natto mixed with chopped pickled radish, kiriboshi daikon. It represents, extreme frugality, making sure nothing is wasted, stretching resources. It's traditional craft born from necessity.
So putting it all together, eating in Mito isn't just about flavor.
Not at all. It's like reading a living history text. You can trace the region's economic ups and downs, from the luxury suggested by eel to the sheer tenacity and ingenuity shown in things like shimi konnyaku and soboro natto. It's the story of the people, right there on the plate. Hashtag outro at a run.
Okay, wow. Let's try and bring all these threads back together for you, the listener. What the sources revealed is that Mito isn't just a simple historical postcard. It's much more complex, more dynamic. It's like a 5-dimensional cultural journey, really designed for the traveler who wants to get beneath the surface to understand the layered reality of a place.
hmm We basically connected those 5 different spots, those nodes, back to some core philosophical ideas for you to think about. We started with the intense rationality and the ethical weight at the Kodokan. Then we moved to the deep foundational myth at Yoshida Shrine. We felt the cycle of life and the power of continuity at Rokujizo-ji Temple. We decoded the visible and, more importantly, the hidden social structure at the Otemon Gate and the nearby ruins. And finally, we got a taste of practical survival wisdom embedded in the local cuisine.
What really struck me listening back to all this is the choices involved. Every city, every community makes choices about its history. What parts do we rebuild and put on display like that Grand Castle Gate? And what parts do we allow to crumble or maybe even actively bury or forget, like those everyday samurai foundations, the mundane stuff?
Right.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. A provocative question, perhaps. When you walk around your own town, your own neighborhood, start looking with these layers in mind. What history is your city choosing to celebrate with its statues and plaques and restorations? What's the official story being presented? And then, how can you find the other fragments? The microscopic evidence, the old family recipes, the forgotten place names, the local legends, the subtle outlines in the ground, the pieces that might tell the hidden, more complex, and maybe, ultimately, the truer story of where you live. Keep digging. There's always more beneath the surface. We'll see you in the next deep dive.